Welcome to the Physician Wealth Med podcast. It's wealth medicine for doctors. If you're a doctor and you have no time, it looks like you found us just in time. This podcast is for all doctors who would like to work on their personal wealth, but do not have traditional hours to do so because they have no time. We're here to jump into topics that will help you address your wealth both inside and outside of your practice so that you can live the life of significance you're dreaming of. You'll hear from your peers, you'll hear from industry professionals, and your host and wealth advisor, me, Kevin Sullivan. This is your time. Now let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome again to the Physician Wealth Med podcast. We like to say it's wealth medicine for doctors. I'm your host and wealth advisor, Kevin Sullivan. And if you don't know a little bit about my background by now, I started in the business in 1989 as an advisor. I'm also the author of the book, Managing Income in Retirement, Planning with Purpose. And we have clients, active clients in 14 different states. So that presents a unique opportunity for us to talk to you today. If you're in one of those states, we could probably work with you. But this podcast is specifically for doctors, and therefore we don't make any recommendations on the podcast. We just make sure that we're providing good financial sound content for doctors who seem to have busy schedules and have no time during traditional hours. So we try to make this available so that you can play it back when you have time. And that's what the whole key is about this. And we're so happy today to have Dr. Kenneth Kurbs with us today, a chiropractor who's been in the business for many years. His resume is just impeccable, and he just happens to be my personal chiropractor too. He's met me at all times, and I appreciate all the service that you've done for me. And when I started this thought process of doing a Physician Wealth Meds, I definitely had him in mind. I wanted to get him as a guest on our show right away. Dr. Ken Kurbs, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Yes, I appreciate that. Let's get right into it. What's been your greatest challenge as a chiropractor regarding personal wealth? This is a wealth podcast for doctors, and I've always said that a lot of times doctors are busy working in their practice, especially in those early years. And a lot of times, just like us, we get busy as advisors working in our practice. And sometimes it's, do we work on our practice, or what are we doing outside the practice? And I've said a couple of times in other podcasts that your financial engine is the practice that you have, and it really affords you the lifestyle that you have and all of that. But it's the personal second financial engine of things that you do outside of your business that can really build sustainable wealth that will last for generations. So in your instance, I'd love to get your feedback on, with all the years that you've been a doctor, what is your greatest challenge as a chiropractor regarding creating personal wealth, or some of the obstacles that you've run into along the way?
So let me go a little bit back in my history. Okay. So first of all, so people realize that on March 18th, which is in 3 weeks, it is the 40th anniversary of me becoming a chiropractor. So I've been in this business for a while. My first 2 years, I practiced as associate doctor down in North Carolina, and then came back up here in 1984. So I built a practice from scratch. Day one, I did not buy out a practice. I didn't take anybody else's practice over with. I started out on my own, and my practice grew quite rapid right from the start. Realize again, I was the first new chiropractor to come into town in 25 years. I came in with a much fresher look, a very different approach as far as from a diagnostic standpoint and an evaluation point. So that really allowed my practice to grow. So in my early years, it was like, okay, I just got to pay off the debt, school loan debt, starting a business debt, all that type of thing. And when I first initiated my practice, I was still single. I did get married within the next year. So that changed the dynamic of what happened with growth. So it was just pay your bills and save some money on the side. Probably the best thing that I ever did was to discipline myself enough to put a specific amount of money aside every week. So it was like that money went out first before anything else went. So to build accounts from that perspective. One of the biggest challenges probably in the practice, I always was a proponent of keeping my overhead low, which I think is a key. And that's a problem that so many doctors in whatever aspect of the healthcare professions they go in tend to get into very high overheads. And that's puts a tremendous amount of pressure on your profit margins. So by running a cash-based practice and keep my overhead low, I was also able to keep my staff to a very minimum too. So I wasn't paying out huge amounts in payroll, even when my practice grew and got much successful. we were still able to do it because of the nature of what happens. With technology today, it's so much better because you've got a computer. We didn't have computers at that time. You've got the computer, you've got electronic health records, you've got automatic processing of credit cards, you've got all those type of things that I didn't have any of that stuff back in that day. I wish I would have had the technology today back 40 years ago, and things would have been, it would have been a very different type situation.
There's a lot in what you just said. Give us an idea of how old were you when you started your practice back in 1983?
Let's see. I was 27 years old when I started my practice.
You got married at 28.
Got married at 28. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so that was a lot to take on. Okay. Because first of all, in my educational background, the one thing that although I'm very competent as the clinician and as the chiropractor practicing what I did, but I got little to no background in business, in running a business, establishing a business. And so then even when I went into the associateship practice in North Carolina, which was a huge practice, I was one of 3 doctors. We were seeing on average of 250 patients per day in that clinic. It was a very large, all personal injury based practice, which was, again, we'll talk about the other time. But so when I came into Lockport to start my own practice, I had no idea what I was doing. So the 3 people that helped me, first of all, I was looking for office space. All right. So I finally nailed down my initial office space, and the landlord is the one who probably guided me the most. He knew I was a newbie. He knew he had some level of confidence in me. I had experience behind me, so I wasn't coming in right out of school. He then got me directed towards a banker and then an attorney. And between a banker, attorney, my landlord, and an accountant, they're the ones that literally handled getting the business established. Okay. And thank God for them, because had not a clue of what I was doing. I knew what I had to do from the practitioner standpoint, but I didn't know what I had to do from the actual running of the business and paying taxes and just, setting up bank accounts and tax ID numbers and all of that stuff. I just was clueless. And I think that's one thing where medical schools, dental schools, chiropractic schools in the healthcare professions severely lack in their training, is that you are setting these people out in the world to be business people, and yet you're giving them virtually no background in that at all. So
that's an excellent
hopefully
point.
Changed a little bit, but I don't think they've changed enough to really make that significant difference.
Yeah. And that goes to the value of a team. We have another podcast on that about having the value of a team with all those people around you. You center stage to be the focus of everything that you need to do to get your job done. And we see that a lot in the financial industry too, where you have advisors that might work in a bank setting or in a larger practice, and they're very good at what they do. And the thought of breaking away to be a business owner, to add that to the plate, scares a lot of people.
Yeah.
And with some doctors too, I'm thinking maybe we'll just stay in this practice and do that because I don't have that confidence or that knowledge to break off on my own and now pay the light bill, get set up with another tax ID number, and those efficiency that need to happen. And what impresses me most about you is how you built it from scratch. You didn't to buy a practice, like you said.
And that was things that I was discouraged against. I was told, oh, you're never going to be able to do that. And then realized I came in, and when I set up my practice, I set it up all out. I had full x-ray facilities in my office. I had all the technology of the time available. And I saw that in other practitioners within our community, they were so antiquated in everything that they approached. So that was an attraction for people to come and say, I have a profession that was misunderstood for many years and was chastised for many years. And here I come in and say, no, this is the way it's supposed to be done. And I did it that way. And I think that had a huge reflection on how quickly my practice grew. I actually made more in my first month in practice than I did in the entire year previously as an associate doctor in North Carolina.
Look at that. See, how fantastic is that?
I knew I was on the right track. I knew things were going right, even though I didn't have that confidence, but I just said, I got to make this work. I've always been, if you have to choose to sink or swim, I'm swimming, whatever the adversity is going to be. And what's interesting, what you said about a team, I didn't realize I had a team, but I had a team.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
I had no idea. I wish I would have looked at it from that perspective back then. Most of what I did was out of either desperation or by mistake. And then someone said, oh, no, you can't do that. This is what you got to do.
The day that integrity is compromised is the day we leave.
I told my children, you only get to build your reputation one time. You never get to rebuild your reputation. It's one time. Once you screw up, it will haunt you forever. And that was another important thing that when I mentor new docs coming into the profession, because they'll say, hey, should I start out in practice right away by myself? And I'll always say, no, do not do that. Okay. Because coming out of school, even though you think you're very proficient, you're not. You think you know the appropriate flow. You think you know the appropriate case management and so forth, but you don't. Because see, when I was working in a practice of 1,000 patient visits a week at 250 a day, I was exposed to so much in the 2 years that I did that when I went into my own practice, I was very confident in how the flow was going to go and so forth. And I said, if you go into a small town and start your practice from scratch and you have no experience and you have all the good intentions, but you screw up unintentionally, that will haunt you for the rest of your career.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good advice.
I have two of my children who are both chiropractors now, and one who has been out for 5 years and one who is just graduating next month. And they both have gone into associate, or one is going into associate practice once she graduates, and not with me either, not with me, but with somebody else. She needs out and experience those things for herself. My son has done he associated in Norway, in the country of Norway for 3.5 years, and now practices in Ithaca, New York for the last 2 years. So he's building that rapport, he's building that reputation and so forth, so that if he ever decides either to go out on his own or to join me at some point, that groundwork is already laid. I have a classmate of mine. He was 4th generation chiropractor. He was the 62nd chiropractor in the family.
Wow.
With cousins, aunts, uncles, and so forth. His parents had 7 children, and 5 of the 7 became chiropractors. I have 5 children, and 2 of my 5 have become chiropractors. Okay. I was hoping for all 5, but again, that was my dream, not theirs. And I have one that's a school teacher in Thailand, one that's a chemist for Corning Research and Development, and one that's a nursing student, along with the 2 chiropractors. So
very nice.
They've all been very successful in their educational careers and then going on into the working world too. So
yeah. Well, that's good. Now, I just want to go back to age 28 for a second, getting married, and you said you started to put some money away every single week right off the top. That's one of the things that if you listen to Dave Ramsey, he'd say, pay yourself first, and if you live like no one else, you can live like no one else. When I first got in the business, I was 23 years old. And I put this ad in one of those local newspapers that said, you have 30 to 40 years away from retirement. Phew, I caught you just in time. So I think there's the magic of compounding interest over time and something that's systematic. But there's also room for doctors who might feel like, I got out of the gate late. I had to deal with my student loans. Here I am in my mid-30s and I'm just getting started. I feel like I'm behind my peer group. What are other people just like me doing? But I just want to say it's never too late. You can always kick it into gear for your savings.
And let me go back to that. So my wife and I, my wife's a registered nurse. Here I am. And so I was 28, she was 21 when we got married. We're just going forward. We're just moving ahead. And we wanted to start a family right away. And that didn't happen. Okay. And it took 7 years before our first child came. Here we are. We were labeled as dinks, double income kids. Okay. Here we were just having the life. She worked part-time. I worked full-time. I worked my schedule around her work schedule because she didn't have the flexibility that I had. We traveled a lot. We did a lot of things back in those days. And in a way that was good for us, because we had a lot of experiences that once the kids came, things very dramatically changed for us. So there were two things in my career that changed that they were positive, but they financially weren't positive. And that was one, having 5 children, okay, which can be an incredible financial drain. And then the other one, the one that probably hit me the worst, I also realized it was the decision that when we started having children, that my wife was going to be a stay-at-home mom. So again, the right decision to be a stay-at-home mom, but literally overnight lost her entire income. Okay. So then I had to compensate for everything. So that was a hit. Move fast forward. We raised 5 kids. We have my kids range from 21 to 31. They are incredible. They have turned out so good because my wife's and my focus has always been our children, their education, their work ethic, and just their integrity. That was just always like the most important things for us. So therefore, as a result of that, it wasn't as easy to put money aside and save. The worst hit came for me financially was in 2010, when in 2010 was the year that the New York State work comp law changed dramatically, so significantly that I lost 40% of my business in less than 6 weeks.
Just shifting gears again a little bit, what do you do differently in your practice that makes your practice unique? And now I'll leave that open-ended. That could be advertising, it could be newsletters, emails, events. I know you have a radio show, so I don't know if you want to talk about that.
I had my own radio talk show now that's twice per month. Next month, it'll be 32 years that I've been doing that consecutively. Okay. I'm the longest running radio show on our local 1340 AM station here in Lockport. So I've done that. So obviously that has given me a significant amount of name recognition in the community. I've always been very involved in my community. I live in my community and I'm involved in my community. Those are two really important. There are many doctors that practice in a community but do not live in that community, and they come in to do their job and then they leave. They don't socialize in the community. They don't participate in the community. I chose I wasn't going to do that. We do a daily newsletter, an email newsletter. I am doing email marketing. We're just ramping that up right now. The other thing too that's probably more unique than, let's say, just in comparison to other chiropractors within my community is, first of all, I'm one of the few, if not the only one, that has more advanced diagnostic technology in the office. I give my patients what they want and need and not what I want. Okay. So I don't base my care based on what I want. It's what they need and what they want. So that's something that happens so many times in healthcare in general, as far as we've gotten into such a crisis within our healthcare society, as far as insurance. So for an example, my father, who just passed away 3 weeks ago at the age of 94, amazing guy, had a wonderful life, but he was hospitalized for 6 days, 6 days in the hospital. $30,000. Okay.
Wow.
$5,000 a day for him to be in that hospital. Now, realize this, there wasn't anything of any heroic measures done. Surprisingly, when my daughter came to shadow me in the office for the day, I've been in practice for a long time, and patient after patient that was coming in here, when I'd introduce my daughter and say, this is Hannah, she's going to be Dr. Hannah in another 2 months. And I go, and they immediately, without any solicitation, go, I've been seeing your dad for 35 years. And your dad got me out of this and got me out of this mess, this and did this and did this. And that was the first time. It was a huge awakening for her because she never experienced that before. She never hung out in my office. She never met my patients. She never spent time in that environment. But see, the important thing was from the very beginning was about building that relationship with my patient so that whenever they felt the need to come, they came. I've had patients come back to me, haven't seen me in 25 years. And when they needed me, they called me, and they're welcome here. There are doctors' offices out there. If you're not in there within a certain period of time, you are then expelled from their practice. They'll dismiss you as a patient. I've only one time ever dismissed a patient from my practice, and that was an initial consultation because of his absolute belligerency. It was a really bad fit. He was in the wrong place, and I was not the person that was going to tolerate that. And that's tough to do when you're early in practice because you're in survival mode. But I learned that very quickly, that I'm not willing to compromise myself for someone else, what they thought they should do.
That's right. Yeah.
And that's the tough thing to stand for. Sometimes people sell themselves out either to an insurance company or to in medicine to pharmaceutical companies and things like that. They'll sell themselves out to that stuff. And I just chose not to do that. I have a wife of 38 years. I have 5 children that I have wonderful relationships with all of them. That was more important to me than just making money and being successful within.
That's a great point.
Yeah, you could just put your head down with I've seen too many practitioners do that. They put their head down and they just go. It's never enough. It's always got to be one more, one more, one more. And I chose not to do that. And has it affected me? Absolutely. I'm probably not the most successful guy in the world. But there's a trade-off in order to do that.
Definitely. And when we think about what are you doing differently that makes you unique, and sometimes we're looking for all the other answers. You do a radio show, or you stay in contact with your patients and you have impeccable timing to get people in and out at a moment's notice. But then when you boil it all down, it all comes down to your name, your integrity, and that goes further than many people might think.
So someday when I'm dead and gone, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I leave behind as far as this.
Yeah, because your integrity has rooted you so that the patients trust you and they know that they can, even when you say it comes back in 25 years, you still make room for them versus fill out this form you have to apply to be a patient again.
And what I say to people is just stay focused. Just put all your effort into your specialty, what you do. If you're a podiatrist, be the best possible podiatrist you can, and don't get distracted by all the other outside stuff that's coming at you, because it's always coming at you. There's always a new product, a new deal, a new whatever that's going to make you a lot of money and do all those things. But there's also the trade-off with that.
There's a lot of freedom being able to say yes to all the right things and no to the things that you need to say no to. It's liberating too. Once you know where that focus is, you can say, okay, here's yes to all of that and no to everything else.
Yeah. And what happens, the no's become, the older I get, the no's become far more prevalent than the yeses. There's very few new things I will take on. And again, my practice has gone through different phases. I have 40 years in practice. Am I working at the same pace and level that I did back 20 years ago? Absolutely not. Do I need to? Nope. I like it the way I have it. I have a very personalized practice. From experience, you know what? If you don't see me for a year, you can call me or text me and say, hey, can I get in today? The answer is usually no problem. Okay. Yeah.
And this is a true statement, everyone.
that is just the way I work. Okay. Yeah. Once you are established as a patient in my office, I will see you no matter what. And only with a few exceptions. I'm out of town. Okay. If I'm not in town, believe me, there's been plenty of times I've even had situations on emergency situations on my days off, on a weekend, on a holiday. Now, I've never had a patient take advantage of that situation, but they know I'm available if they needed it. And I have stepped up many times to doing that,
Okay, you got a common thread going here. Your integrity is one thing that roots you to get the business and the reliability and also the respect and the admiration of all your patients for all of these years. And that's a huge driver for your business. You also, have a doctor's heart. And that goes a long ways in my book, because there's physicians out there that don't have a doctor's heart. They're just in it for maybe some other things. And I know that you have seen our relatives on a Saturday. You have opened it. So I have experienced this live, and he does do it.
My connection with your family, my connection was back 3 generations. And you know how I've stepped up for certain people in your family, and you know what I've done. Okay. And see, this is the other thing. First of all, realize this, because I've had my own radio show for 32 years, people who do not know me assume that might be an act. Okay. What people don't realize is that the way I am here with you right now, the way I am on my radio show, is the way I am in my backyard when someone's coming to visit. Okay. I don't have alter personalities. I don't get on the show when I need to. It's just be yourself. It makes life a whole lot easier that way. I don't have to realize what situation I'm in and how I have to perceive myself. So the way I dress, the way I act, the way I go about life.
And what would you like to close us out with?
Probably the best thing is just trust yourself. One of the best things that I have done, I do a lot of reading and stuff like that. And a little over a year ago, my daughter Hannah, who is the one who's becoming a chiropractor next month, gave me for Christmas a book called The Daily Stoic, by Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday is the author. And it's about Stoic philosophy. And it has probably been, and it's set up so it's 366 days, okay, one extra for leap year, but that you read one passage per day. So it's one page per day. And I disciplined myself now since January 1st of last year. So for a year and 2 months, I read a passage every single day. Okay. That has been probably one of the most powerful things to keep me centered, to keep me focused, to keep me non-reactive to the world around me. It made such a huge difference in the final stages of my father's life, in accepting we were all going to die. And it kept me very calm and very centered when some other members of my family couldn't stay so centered. Okay. And so those are the important things. So I think for anybody is to stay true to yourself, keep improving yourself, even though, what some people think I'm at the end of my career, it's my gosh, I feel like I'm being reborn again. I think I got another 10 to 20 years left in me.
That's fantastic.
And I have moving forward. I love what I do. I'll continue to do what I do. I have no intentions of ever retiring as long as I can physically and mentally be capable of doing my job. And also I take care of myself too. I practice what I preach, from being under regular chiropractic care to being very strict about my diet and my exercise program, so that I don't end up like so many people that I treat throughout my entire career. Coming to me when it's too late, it's tough. You need to start as early as you can. Just like with financially, the earlier you start, the better. It's no different with your health. The earlier you start, the better the payoff is going to be down the road.
There's nothing like living a life of wellness all along the way.
In every aspect of that life, whether it be health, money, relationships, and so forth, all of that. It's a total package.
Well, there you have it. Only the best, ladies and gentlemen. This has been Conversation with Dr. Kenneth Kurbs, very well-established chiropractor in our community. I just want to thank you so much today. Take your time to share with us these great insights. I'm looking forward to hearing more. I'd love to do this again with you. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Kevin.
All right, thank you.
Had a great day. Thanks.
Okay. That's our podcast for today. And remember, if you're not working on your personal wealth, who is? Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Any questions about what you heard today, please send an email to kdsullivan@lpl.com. Physician Wealth Meds, wealth medicine for doctors. Dr. Kenneth Kurbs is not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Physician Wealth Meds. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide any specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.